Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. The Young and the Restless spoilers. Sharon's arrest leaves family reeling, can't escape Heather consequences forever. The Young and the Restless, Y&R, spoilers reveal that Sharon Newman, Sharon Case, is working hard to keep her freedom and preserve her one remaining joy in life. Sharon doesn't want to get separated from her family, so she's hiding her trail and trying to make sure nobody ever finds out the whole truth. Of course, even Sharon herself can't be certain of everything that went down the night Heather Stevens, Veil Bloom, drew her last breath. The same goes for Y&R fans, since we only saw Sharon's perspective, meaning viewers don't know what went down during Sharon's blackout either. There's a very good chance that the show's using that blackout as a twist setup. It's probably going to be revealed that Sharon wasn't to blame for Heather's demise after all, but she still looks guilty at this point in the story. Regardless of whether Sharon is actually responsible for Heather's grim fate, she still wrapped her body up and tossed it off the side of a bridge. Since Sharon has also been posing as Heather via text, she's making some moves that'll come back to bite her. Sharon can't escape the consequences of her actions forever, so it's just a matter of time until she gets arrested. You can bet Sharon's family will be left reeling once the clues point in her direction and she's finally taken into custody. That may not happen until down the road, but it's difficult to believe Y&R will pass up the opportunity to put handcuffs on Sharon and throw her in a jail cell for a while. Even if Sharon ultimately gets off the hook due to her mental issues and a surprise alternate culprit, she could still suffer behind bars until it's all sorted out. Sharon needs to stop listening to Cameron Kirsten, Lyndon Ashby, and get the help she needs, but it's tough for her to think clearly enough to know what's best for herself in this state. Things will get worse for Sharon before they get better, so we'll bring you more predictions on her arrest and updates on how that stunning news will affect her loved ones. The Young and the Restless spoilers say Sharon Case will continue to deliver incredible performances along the way, so stay tuned. The afternoon sun shone brightly over Genoa City, but for Sharon Rosales, it felt like the darkest day she had ever experienced. The steady rhythm of the handcuffs snapping shut on her wrists echoed in her ears, louder than any other sound in the police station. The whole room seemed to stop, the usual buzz of officers and paperwork replaced by a stunned silence as Sharon's face, pale and shocked, met the cold, stern gaze of Heather Stevens. She had thought this chapter of her life was behind her, a distant nightmare she had escaped. But now, as Heather stood before her, clipboard in hand, it was clear. The past had caught up with Sharon, and it wasn't letting go without a fight. Heather, the ambitious and relentless prosecutor, had been building a case against Sharon for months, silently biding her time. For years, Sharon had been a beacon of strength in Genoa City, having overcome countless trials and personal tragedies. But no one, not even Sharon, was immune to the weight of unresolved sins. Her arrest sent shockwaves through her family, and the ripple effects were felt immediately. At Crimson Lights, where Sharon was practically the heart and soul of the place, Ray's jaw tightened as he received the call. He couldn't believe it, his own wife, behind bars. He had been Sharon's rock for so long, the man who helped her steady herself after the tumultuous years following her battle with cancer and her heartbreaking losses. Yet in this moment, Ray found himself powerless. Back at home, Faith's eyes welled with tears as she stared blankly at her phone, unable to comprehend the reality of her mother's situation. She had just gotten her life back on track, starting college and building a future without the shadow of her parents' past mistakes looming over her. But now it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. Her mom, who had fought so hard to rebuild their lives, was being dragged through the mud yet again. Noah, hearing the news while working on his latest art project, felt his stomach churn with anger and frustration. He had always admired his mom's resilience, her ability to keep moving forward, no matter what life threw at her. But Sharon's arrest felt like an undeserved punishment. He dropped his brush, the bright streak of paint on his canvas a bitter contrast to the dread creeping through his veins. How could this be happening? Why now? Sharon had built her life back from the ruins so many times, and yet, here she was being torn apart by Heather Stevens' vendetta. Heather, with her cool, calculated demeanor, had made it her mission to make Sharon pay for her past actions. Some whispered that this was more personal than professional, that Heather had always harbored a grudge against Sharon, perhaps rooted in the complicated history their families shared. The Newman and Stevens clans had often been on opposing sides of the law, and Sharon had crossed more than one line in her complicated past with Victor and the Newman Empire. But what exactly was Heather after? The charges against Sharon were still unclear, a foggy haze of legal jargon that no one could fully grasp yet. Some speculated it had to do with Sharon's involvement in old Newman family secrets. Others wondered if this was connected to a long-buried crime she had never been held accountable for. All Sharon knew was that Heather had dug deep, unearthing something that Sharon thought had been long forgotten. In the cold holding cell, Sharon sat alone, her mind racing. She had fought so hard for normalcy after the years of scandal, heartbreak, and loss. Crimson Lights had become her sanctuary, a place where she could focus on the future rather than the mistakes of the past. She thought she had moved on, but there were always consequences, even for the choices you thought you'd outlived. Heather was relentless. The prosecutor had built her career on taking down tough cases, and she wasn't about to let Sharon slip through her fingers. In her mind, Sharon represented the untouchable class of Genoa City, the ones who could break the rules and somehow come out clean on the other side. Heather was determined to break that cycle, to make an example out of Sharon. It wasn't just about the law anymore, it was about justice, and Heather wasn't backing down. Back at the Newman ranch, Nick and Victoria struggled with the news of Sharon's arrest. Nick, despite his complex relationship with Sharon, felt a pang of protectiveness for his ex-wife, the mother of his children. They had shared a complicated love, one that had seen its fair share of heartbreak, betrayal, and reconciliation. He knew Sharon had her demons, but to see her dragged through the legal system like this was a harsh blow. He could feel the weight of his family's legacy pressing down on his shoulders. The Newmans had a way of destroying everyone they touched, and Sharon had always been caught in that storm. Victoria, on the other hand, approached the situation with her usual pragmatism. Sharon's arrest could spell disaster for Newman Enterprises, especially if any family secrets were exposed during the trial. Victoria was fiercely protective of the company, and she would stop at nothing to ensure their interests were protected. But even she couldn't deny the human toll this was taking on their family. As Sharon awaited her fate, she couldn't help but wonder if this was truly the end of the road. Would she finally pay for the mistakes she had made so long ago? Or could she once again rise above the chaos and find redemption? The walls of the holding cell felt suffocating, but Sharon had been in tight corners before. She knew how to fight, but this time the stakes felt impossibly high. Heather, meanwhile, was already preparing for the courtroom battle ahead. She knew Sharon had her supporters, and that Genoa City was a town where loyalty ran deep. But she was confident that the evidence she had gathered would be enough to take Sharon down once and for all. Heather had waited long enough, and now it was Sharon's turn to face the music. As the Rosales and Newman families braced for the fallout, one thing was clear. Sharon's arrest was only the beginning. The storm was coming, and no one in Genoa City would be spared its wrath.